Yes, and we all entered the dark room. We all entered looking very nervous, a little bit dubious at what we were going to be asked to do or experience. And
yes, and we all very, very quickly came together as a group, I feel.
First presentation, yes, and the first presentation from Sean was very insightful, and he set the scene for what we would be doing and why it was important.
Yes, and then the first discussions as we followed that, we started to learn more who we were as a group, who we were going to start to easily get on with, and who was going to be a more challenging viewpoint for us.
Yes, and I think the response in relation to some of the points that I've made with regards to inclusion, diversity, cultural integration, etc., has been challenging, but it needed to be opened up so that people could be more open.
Yes, and I think that we formed a group identity quite well and quite quickly.
Yes, and I turned up at the metro station, no car park. I thought I was going to be late. There was a car park 200 yards away. I have got it here on time, and I've enjoyed doing what we're doing.
Yes, and to my shame, despite living in central Manchester for 15 years, I didn't know where this was.
Yes, and I think our group had a lot of fun together, and it didn't distract from the job in hand.
Yes, it has been a good 2 weeks, and there are a lot of intelligent people here with very valid points, and they've expressed them very well.
Yes, and it was good to see people keep coming back, which is a good sign for the first day, isn't it?
Yes, and it was good to be in a space with a group of non-judgmental people.
I really enjoy, and the Andy Fry I found really informative and really useful, as it came at the right time before the voting around the scrutiny and tolerance, and how to do it effectively.
Yes, and I found Sean's, the initial presentation, the most informative, because I didn't know what I was really doing here in the first place.
Yes, and I really enjoyed Dr. Mustafa's presentations because there were 3 different sessions, and he told us it was a lot of theory, but he told us a theory which was relevant and where we could go from here and what still needs to be thought out.
Yes, and I liked George Vulgaris' session because he was able to take a very dry topic and just info dump that very rapidly to us to give us a set of terms of reference as to what the technical items around information governance meant.
Yes, and I was interested in Dr. Vulgaris, Mustafa, I think, and Andy Fry, because of the way in which they delivered their pieces of work.
Yes, and we had a session with someone from the GMCA, which was quite a lot of information delivered quite quickly, but it was really good. That was a but to see that there is that commitment there in GMCA, even if a bit like high level.
Yes, and the first session was very good, and it set the tone for the rest, and everything else followed on from there.
Yes, and Dr. Vulgaris didn't shy away from difficult and annoying questions.
Yes, and the transparency and scrutiny session, I thought I knew a bit about it, but it was wonderful.
Yes, I also like the transparency, scrutiny and governance talk, as at first I didn't think I would like it because I thought, yeah, I know all that, it's basic, and how does it relate to this topic? But as the talk went on, halfway through, that's when it opened up and I thought, yeah, I can see that, I can see how that relates.
Yes, and as someone that walked in with quite a bit of professional and technical experience, I was pleased to see that most of what I learned over the last few days was actually from the rest of the jurors, specifically because they were coming at it from different angles and a layperson's perspective. And I hope that the Commission keep an open mind and take that on board for any decisions and policy decisions moving forward to make sure that they keep in that communication with the lay community.
Yes, and I thought that Mustafa and Vry and Vulgaris particularly communicated a lot of dense information in quite a short space of time very well.
Yes, and it was very involving everyone and their personal opinions, and everyone being able to have their own voice and sharing their own views and putting their own points of views together.
Yes, and everybody was free to discuss whatever we needed to discuss and ask whatever questions we needed to ask, and were given time to explore the answers.
Yes, and I think it was democratic because we used Slido, which was anonymous. So once we did the voting, nobody knew what everybody else voted for. So that's pretty much democratic.
Yes, and by swapping around in the small groups in our discussions and constantly talking to different people, we've not just got stuck in the same mindset of the same pattern with the same group, but actually explored all the options.
Yes, and the scenario sections were relevant to the polling decisions of all of the people involved here.
Yes, and I think the facilitators and the group did a good job of creating an environment where everybody felt that they could express themselves.
Yes, and whatever one person said, it was taken down and it was studied, and that was their opinion, and it helped enlighten other people in the group.
Yes, and everyone got their opportunity to say what they wanted to say, and everyone felt included in the group dynamic and so on.
Yes, and I felt that we had free will to decide which way to go, and yet we voted in the end, which was very democratic.
Yes, I also feel that I think the post-it notes were a great way of showing that everybody got to decide their opinion and put it up on the board and presented it. And then the Slido digital tool actually put that up, and you could rank, and obviously with it being anonymous, then there's no judgment. And I do like the Slido because it's like a digital version of a psychology tool called a repertory grid, which is used for decision making.
Yes, and I felt that the scenarios were well designed so that there could be a view taken on each of the extremes, and I hope that that is continued to be refined over the years as things develop, particularly refined with the juries in mind.
Yes, and I also thought that the post-it notes were useful for someone like me who sometimes struggles to get their words out.
Yes, and it was well structured that you'd have time to read the information to yourself, then put your points down, then go into a group, and then put your douche spots on douche, shower, not a shower, dots on the post-it notes, eliminating to narrow it down so we're not repeating ourselves. Yeah, very, very well done.
Yes, and the process of elimination was really useful, and
Yes, and I think the decisions were made based on the information that we were given during the sessions. And then after discussions, we just took our own opinions and what we've learnt and gathered them together.
Yes, and sometimes the sessions gathered immediately around the flip chart boards while we were trying to work out which post-it notes actually said the same as each other were more productive than some of the earlier discussions.
Yes, and I was able to come to my decision through the processes that were given to me, and also the carrot cake.
Yes, and like Tom, I think the system of kind of resolving everyone's post-its into a broad consensus that kind of represents everyone, including the more kind of like the sort of, you know, the less popular kind of thoughts and opinions were there too, was really good.
Yes, and all the information gradually came together, and you could make a very good informed decision on that information.
Yes, and through the building of consensus and so on.
Yes, and I seem to have made my decision at the beginning of the week and soon found out that it was modified as the week went on discussions with the other people in the group. I made my decisions on the information and then changed them on discussions with the group.
Yes, and with the Slido, I think the efficiency of all the statements being typed up was very good. And the fact that it was straight after the discussion, so it was fresh in the mind. And then you could read through and think, yeah, we discussed that, we talked about that, we knew what the solution was to that, or what the questions were to that. And then you could make an informed decision yourself after you read through them and thought, well, yeah, that's more important than that one. And then that's more important than that one. And then you look at your own posts and think, well, what's my opinion in this selection? Is it more relevant than this? And it's just a good read through, and it was very well done, very quickly typed up, very efficient and easy to use.
Yes, and I was grateful that we had the group that we had and the range of people, because I felt that helped to become more efficient. And points were raised where I kind of kicked myself for not raising it, because it's normally the kind of point I'd make. But when you're under pressure and you've got a time, it's good that we have this group of people, because, for example, John pointed out regulation at one point, and I thought, well, of course you need regulation, but actually none of us had said it. Sometimes you think of it, but you actually need one person to just be there to say it, and that's something that a dynamic you only get when you're in a group like this. So that definitely helped the decision-making process, because it reduced the risk of things being overlooked and just being assumed to be there.
Yes, and I echo that. And I thought the system of being able to think on your own for a moment and collect your own thoughts on all the information, and then kind of bounce those ideas off a small group before coming back to the main group was really useful to get challenged and think in different ways.
Yes, and it was a lot more informative and more involved than I was originally told.
Yes, and it is probably much more important than I thought it was, because I originally thought it would just be market research.
Yes, and I'm really glad I took part in it, because it was an excellent few days. It was good to learn something new, and it was good to meet people.
Yes, and it's putting me and several other people, I'm sure, out of our comfort zones, having to suddenly do improvisational things.
Yes, and I have taken a lot out of this information. Thanks, sorry.
Yes, and I've learned a lot, not just from the witnesses and speakers and exercises, but from the other jury members, which I didn't expect to.
Yes, and it has been a lot to learn, a lot to take in, and it is the way to go.
Yes, and it's nice to know that not everyone is as cynical as I am.
Yes, and I hope at the end of the day someone is going to take advantage of what we've been working on.
Yes, and I agree. This has been quite a good experience, and I believe that not just Manchester should benefit from it, but the whole country.
Yes, and it was good to see us reach a consensus, given there's such a wide range of views, and we all accept each other's views and don't say but.
Yes, and it would be good to see more of this kind of deliberation process in future.